please. It's a pleasure.
This meeting is being recorded.
Sorry.
It's a pleasure to introduce Lucy Ryall, who is today going to be starting the first of hopefully a series of mini CPDs of around 10 minutes for the HA Southwest Network. Very briefly, in 10 seconds, the HA Southwest Network is the first affiliated historical association network we've had in the southwest of England, and we have 9 history teachers supporting a number of different schools in and around their local areas. Today, Lucy's very kindly put together a brand new workshop, planning and delivering a source-based unit. Lucy, over to you.
Thank you very much. Okay, guys, I'm going to share my screen and then I will crack on, and we're going to stick to close to 10 minutes as possible because I know everyone is very busy, but I will be hovering over to check if there's anybody in the waiting room. Here we go. Okay, so today I thought I'd talk about planning and delivering a source-based unit, because this is something that we as a department where I work in Poole have been working really, really hard on. The disclaimer I must give, though, is that we are in the process of delivering this unit. So our evaluation is kind of ongoing, and there's definitely going to be hiccups, but I wanted to share how we got there and what we were planning to do with it. So what was the aim? We wanted to build a unit that developed the source skills of our students, but also build a template for source work for the rest of the curriculum. We were getting to year 11 and year 10 and students were still really struggling with how to understand sources. So we felt like we needed to go back to Key Stage 3 and really have a unit that was based around source work. It happened to be that at the same time we were reworking a different unit anyway. So I took that away in the summer and turned it into what became our source-based unit. It wasn't the original idea. But we've kind of done, hopefully, what I think is quite a nice thing. I don't teach year 8 this year, so we will find out what everyone else thought afterwards. Some of this as well is during, my school is very, very, very nearly due in Ofsted, and looking at like the history reviews for Ofsted, it says that pupils need to learn how historians use sources as evidence to construct, challenge or test claims about the past, and pupils must learn that historical sources provide evidence in relation to specific questions. So that was kind of what drove me. And also I'm jumping ahead there. Also, the breadth of pupils' knowledge can be developed by encounters with a wide range of sources, source types, including objects, oral histories, and artifacts, as well as written sources. So there was quite a few aims of my unit. I wanted to make sure that we were constructing or challenging claims about the past, that they were learning from the sources, and that we had a broad range of sources. We also needed to be aware, and it wasn't the end goal, but we teach AQA, and in AQA GCSE, we have the how useful question. So we weren't driving towards how useful, but we needed to build the foundation for the how useful question. Like, that was an undeniable fact, even though we don't want to teach GCSE and Key Stage 3, we were always aware of that. Utility is really difficult as well. They really struggle with it, but without being able to tell you what a source says and what the provenance is and the purpose and the message, they can't do usefulness anyway. So those were kind of our aims, the more holistic aims, and then the specific GCSE content aims. What do we currently have? A real variety of interaction with sources, and there was no real end goal. Just because we're historians, we'd included sources in our schemes of work, and I'll show you some examples of our slides in a minute. We had a variety of ways of teaching sources. We weren't a school that follows like nature, origin, purpose or anything like that. I think we're quite a creative team, so we don't like being hemmed in by things like that. That's not to say it doesn't work, but for us as a group, it wasn't particularly our style. And like I said before, year 10 students were coming to us, having been taught skills from different people, and we kind of wanted to make sure they would come to us, having had it from the ground up in the same way. This is an example of one of the ways we taught source skills. We had, this is from our Norman unit, and we had images of the Bear Tapestry, and they had to link up what they could see in the Bear Tapestry and then label it themselves. So we were kind of identifying sources, but this was one way. And then in the same year, they had a sheet that looked like this, which I think we stole from Fitzwilliams on Twitter, which was amazing, but again, it looked different and we weren't necessarily pulling out the same skills. So there's nothing wrong with this sheet and we love it, but we just wanted to really streamline how we were presenting the sources. And this sheet works really well, but it wasn't getting into what we wanted to do. And then a final one was in the same unit, another sheet that looked completely different. The kids were having the same skills, but they were doing it in completely different ways, so they weren't able to see that they were doing exactly the same thing. So what did we do? We had a unit on the slave trade, which we knew needed reworking. It was really old school, wasn't very good. It was very backwards in terms of it was 20 years ago style teaching of the slave trade, and we wanted to kind of update that. So we decided to deliver a unit on being Black and British. This is my order of lessons. There's only 7 lessons in this unit. The first lesson is an introduction lesson. We really wanted to make sure that if we were going to do sources, we weren't just going to throw lots of images at them and hope they could figure out what was going on. We wanted to follow an order. So you've got your introduction lesson, that's number 1. Number 2 is a knowledge lesson. So this was on Britain and the trade of enslaved Africans. Number 3 was then a source lesson on that previous knowledge lesson. And the next 2 groups of lessons follow that. So Black and British life, a source lesson on Black and British life, abolition lesson, a source lesson on abolition. So whilst the unit doesn't cover as much breadth of knowledge as I would like if I had all the time in the world. So I've just got to let someone in a second. It lets me, there we go. Whilst it doesn't have the breadth of knowledge, we were more interested in building those source skills. So you can see that order that I tried to follow there. And then we decided, the next bit we decided, what do we want year 8s to be able to do with sources? It's not realistic of us to say, let's have them doing usefulness in year 8. That's a really hard skill. And I work in a comprehensive with 1,800 pupils. We have a huge range. We have kids with a reading age of 8 years old, and we have kids with a reading age of 18 years old. So trying to make sure we knew what we wanted in a year 8 to be able to do was really important. We decided as a department, we wanted them to identify what happens in a source, apply knowledge to the source, and start to consider provenance in key terms like nature and origin, but only starting to. We would introduce them. The higher ability kids would probably get pushed a bit more on that. Lower ability would be introduced, but it would be more important to test them on identifying and the knowledge. I'm going to be able to do this in under 10 minutes. It's going to be impressive, guys. So here's what happened. We made the knowledge lesson, and then we did the first source lesson, and it's really structured. We're working really hard on that scaffold. So you've got at the top here the source. What can we learn from it? And I put some prompt questions of what can you see, what can you infer? And then we've got what knowledge supports the source. I've given them 4 options, and the students have to pick the knowledge that supports that source based on the previous lesson. Super scaffolded. Like I said, we're a huge comprehensive and we have such a range of ability. If you wanted to as a teacher, they're able to take that knowledge, the pre-filled knowledge out if they wanted to, and they could get their top set kids to do that themselves. But the idea was we're starting that process of what can you see, what do you know? What can you see, what do you know? So you can see that there. The bottom bit we added, which came from a conversation with James Mosley, who works with me, was having a timeline that showed some key events, but also where the sources fitted into that timeline. Another thing that Ofsted were really big on, and that we know as our department wanted to work on, was chronology, and where do things exist within the timeline of history. And we felt like actually if we're doing sources, let's show students where these sources exist. Not everybody was going to get something from that, but some of our students might start recognizing, oh, this one was made after the abolition, that's really interesting. Or this one was made just before they banned it, so they can start thinking about how that provenance affects it. That was the first source lesson. We decided to remove the scaffold in each source lesson. So the next source lesson, we took away the knowledge. They had to come up with the knowledge on them by themselves. So you've got what can you see and what can you infer? What can you use to support this source? And then we introduced the idea of provenance, nature, what type of source is it, and origin, when was it made? They're not expanding on that knowledge, they're very much just telling me when and where, and then if it's a higher ability group, you can start to push that of, well, what does that mean? What does that tell you? But by taking away the support for the knowledge, we were hoping that they'd kind of be able to progress. And always remembering that lesson before had been all the knowledge. They do have information, they have learned about it. It's the second lesson in that system. And the same thing again, we've got the timeline at the bottom to help them understand the placing of the sources, and we've left on the previous 3 sources. So you've still got A, B, and C, and then we've added E, F, and D, E, F. Got to remember my alphabet then. We've added those as well, so they can start to place the sources in order and see, okay, actually this one F happened way before the one that we were talking about last lesson. And then finally, the challenge, which I'm not sure how this is going to go in lesson, was to take away the scaffold completely. So in their third encounter with sources, they have no scaffold. All I've done is given them the questions. And on the next slide, I haven't put it in this PowerPoint, I've annotated what that could look like for them. This is the bit we're most nervous about, because it can be really hard to deliver unscaffolded source work without wanting to get involved, but we knew we had to let the kids try, because they have to do it in an assessment, they have to do it in an exam. So we have to give them the opportunity to try and analyse those sources. So there you go, no scaffold. We're really hoping this works. But yeah, that's kind of our source-based unit. And I've kind of talked through what our aims were and how we've achieved that. We were really big on the structure, and we've kind of applied the Rosenshine principles of scaffolding. We've used a lot of walkthrough ideas to just slowly take that scaffolding away. Teachers are allowed to decide if they need to put some scaffolding back in if they've got weaker ability groups. There's quite a lot of freedom with how they deliver that unit. And that's our unit. What next is we need to build an assessment to actually test those aims. We had an idea, but we want to make sure we're really testing what we want them to get out of that unit. And then we need to evaluate the scheme of work and see whether it's worked. It's a complete experiment. I'm really excited about it. I think it's a really interesting topic. And I think that what my brain sees, I'm really excited about the lack of scaffolding. I don't know what that's going to look like on paper for the kids. But yeah, that's my 11 minutes of CPD. So I hope that's been useful for you guys. I don't know if Sarah or Andrew, you wanted to add anything on the end.
Thanks so much, Lucy.
Yeah, I think we just wanted to say thank you very much for the just so many good ideas. I've written a whole load of different ideas taking lots of different directions, but that's been great. And thank you for keeping it giving us so much in such a short space of time. Awesome. I think we said that we'll do, if anyone has any questions, we're going to go over to Twitter, and you're more than welcome to post them there, because we want to really keep this to the we've got a question in the chat, but we're going to keep it to the thank you, Eddie. Yeah, that was James Mosley. I don't want to take credit for the timeline idea. That was all James that came on the timeline. But yeah, if you want to have any questions, please throw them into Twitter so that we don't keep people here. We want to make sure that you guys can pop into the CPD and then pop out again. So yeah, I think I'll stop recording. And if you'd like to escape, I'm guessing you're able to escape.